Hello out there, and welcome to the first episode of Bible Talk for the year 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope your weather has not been as weird as we've been having here in Chattanooga. One day last week we were under tornado watch, and just about 3 days later we had a winter storm advisory. 2022 cannot yet decide what season we're in. So stay tuned. Could this be an even stranger year than 2021? Well, let's get into our Bible study at this point. We're in Genesis chapter 9, and we're going to finish the story of Noah. And the last episode recorded from his life is not his best episode of his life.
Why don't we skip this chapter?
No! Why would we skip it?
Because it's nasty.
Maybe. I don't think it's nasty. To me, it's just puzzling and controversial, but it has some important points that we need to make. Let's begin reading in chapter 9, verse 18, and I'll read the nasty part.
Good.
The sons of Noah who went forth from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the people of the whole earth were dispersed. Noah was a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk, and lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. Noah becomes drunk and is lying naked in his tent. Exactly what the sin of Ham is not clear in this, but we'll notice as we read what Noah said after he wakes up from his drunken episode. The only words, by the way, that are recorded from Noah's mouth in the whole book of Genesis, that he is upset with his youngest son Ham, but he curses Ham's son Canaan, which is the first puzzle we'll have to deal with. So Becky, please read chapter 9, 24 through 29.
So Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. Then he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants. He shall be to his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died.
The first thing that has to be deciphered in this account is just what was Ham's offense to his father. He saw his father naked and reported that to his two brothers, who ensured that their father was covered up without gazing on his nakedness themselves. So, since this is a bit of a puzzle, I'm going to call on Becky to explain it to us. What was it that Ham did that was so offensive that a curse results?
That puzzles me too. I'm not sure what the deal was. Maybe it was coming out and telling his brothers because he wanted their brothers to know that that was the condition of their father. But
well, I'm not surprised at your puzzles. So are most scholars who try to unpack this story. It could just be that Ham was making fun of his father and scoffing at him, showing disrespect.
It doesn't make that clear.
No, it doesn't. That's one end of the possible explanation. At the other end of the spectrum, is the phrase the nakedness of his father and the nakedness of their father in verse 22 and 23. If you trace that phrase, which is used in several places in the Old Testament, it sometimes refers to the wife of the father. The nakedness of the father is his wife. And some have even suggested that Ham committed incest with his mother and reported that to his brothers.
That's a big inference there.
That is a big inference. I don't find it entirely persuasive or even slightly persuasive. But you see the range of possibilities that people have tried to find in this. If it had been something involving Noah's wife, there might have been even a hint of that here, and that doesn't seem to be the case. We'll just have to leave it with a possibly likely explanation that it shows disrespect for his father, and that the other two sons try to preserve whatever trace of dignity they can in their father's situation.
Well, is there something inherently sinful in being naked?
Well, I would say you might say there's something inherently shameful about being naked in certain circumstances. You remember Adam and Eve, when they discovered they were naked, felt shame and tried to cover themselves up. There's something in this sinful world that can be shameful about being naked in the wrong circumstances. Certainly, Noah shouldn't have gotten drunk and been exposed like that. But really, the continuing relevance of this passage comes in the curse, and we are surprised, I hope, that the curse is not on Ham. Becky, please read 25 through just verse 25.
Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brethren.
Canaan is cursed, the son of Ham. And of course, we have to try to figure out why the curse is on Canaan and not on Ham, who actually committed the offense. We have noticed before that in verse 18, when Ham is mentioned, the writer explains that he was the father of Canaan. And again in verse 22, he's the father of Canaan. Let me give, without plowing through possible explanations, what seems to be the most accepted explanation of this. And that is the way Moses, or the writer of Genesis, focuses on certain individuals. If there's an individual who's important to the story, he will mention perhaps their relatives and their genealogy first, and then he zeroes in on that person. Some descendants of Abraham are more important than others, for example. And after dealing with Ishmael and dismissing his story, the story focuses on Isaac because he's the son of the promise. He's the one that God's plan is working through. And Canaan here is more important than Ham because who will be the long-time, centuries-long enemy of Israel when they settle in the land?
Canaanites.
The Canaanites, the descendants of Canaan. So that's who the writer is really interested in here. And that may be why Canaan is cursed.
Did the Canaanites actually end up serving the Israelites?
Good question. Since that really comes in the book of Exodus, Numbers, and Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, we don't have to spend much time on it. At times they did, and at times they didn't. I'll put it that way.
Well, did some people claim this curse as a rationale for slavery?
Aha! Now Becky has cut to the quick. That's what I wanted to focus on for the next couple of minutes. That's why I asked last week, what does this passage have to do with the American Civil War? If you go back and study the religious history of America before, during, and even after the Civil War, many religious leaders including those who were well known in the pulpit, said that the curse was on Ham, and they ignored that the curse was on Canaan. Why did they want to focus on Ham? Because they believed, I think somewhat falsely, that Ham was the ancestor of the African people, and that a curse was perpetually on Ham and his descendants, and they were cursed to be slaves, especially to the Semites, descendants of Shem, and those descended from Japhet, who are some of them at least Europeans. And so they sought biblical defense of slavery, that God had put a perpetual curse on the African people, and they should be slaves of the Europeans. To which interpretation I will say as politely as possible, it doesn't really make sense, and it's just a rationalization of why they defended slavery and tried to say it was God's will.
And I would dispute whether or not the curse was something that God endorsed, no matter what it meant. I mean, Noah was hardly in any shape to be pronouncing Holy Writ, you know. He was under the influence, or at least coming out of it. And he was angry.
Becky is demonstrating her usually sharp wit and insight that this is not a curse from God. This is a curse from Noah on one of his 3 sons. It doesn't say that God inspired him to put this curse on Canaan. It's just something that he does out of being upset with Ham. And as I gave a possible interpretation, Canaan is focused on because he is more important to the story.
Well, also, if he wants to hurt him, cursing his son would hurt him more than cursing him.
If he was a good father, yes. If we don't know what kind of father he was, but that certainly makes sense. Unfortunately, this kind of racism, seeing the descendants of Ham as somehow cursed, did not end with the Civil War, although many people shed their blood over either trying to defeat or defend slavery. I know, many people try to say that the war was over states' rights, but I think that slavery was certainly up at the top of the list. That's why people fought. But even up to my lifetime, I've heard people use this verse to try to show that black people are cursed by God. I've even heard preachers from the pulpit say that black people don't have souls. Yet on the other side of racism, people like the Nation of Islam, whose prophet Elijah Muhammad said that white people were devils and were created in a laboratory by a mad scientist and were not human beings at all.
Probably the same ones that created COVID.
They could have been Chinese, I'm not sure. Well, we don't want to make light of that kind of thing, except to say the Bible does not talk about race in the sense that we use the term in modern times. In fact, we can say that race, the idea of race and different races, is somewhat of a chimera.
Chimera?
Chimera, how do you like that word?
I guess you're saying that right. I'm not always
That's what the dictionary says.
I'm sure you're right.
Chimera. A chimera is something that is falsely asserted without any real basis in fact.
I thought it was something that just disappeared and went away.
No.
Okay.
We'll check that out later and get back to you folks.
Sure.
Becky's going to Google it. Google is the bane of my existence.
But I shut my phone off. Go ahead.
But what is race anyway? How do you distinguish one race from another? Is it skin color? I've had friends and acquaintances who were considered of the black race, African American, but their skin was lighter than mine. Is it facial structure, bone structure, blood? We all have the same blood types. And how many races are there? I was taught in elementary school that there were 3 races, and they even taught from the book of Genesis. This was public school back in the day shortly after the flood, when they said the 3 races came from Noah's 3 sons. And at the other extreme, I'm aware of an anthropology textbook I looked at a few years ago. That was Becky's phone coming on, so she can Google. That anthropology textbook listed 12 races. The biblical view, I think, is there are only 2 races of humankind, those who are in God's kingdom and those who are not. And so we'll look just in a minute, in the few minutes that are left, at chapter 10, with those who descended from Noah's 3 sons. And I'm not going to read in chapter 10 all of the names of these descendants, even though there are some fun ones like Gomer, who was one of the sons of Japhet, and Togarmah, not to mention Put and Uz and Buz. But these descendants show us where the descendants of Noah's 3 sons spread out over the earth after the flood, as it says, verse 19. From these people, the whole earth were dispersed. But notice again, whole earth here doesn't necessarily mean the global earth that we're aware of. It seems to mean the area of the biblical world, some of the Middle East as well as other Mediterranean countries. In fact, you don't find 3 different races in the sons of these 3 sons. Shem is the father of the Semites, who include the Jews and some of their related peoples. And Ham is the father of some of the northern African countries like Egypt, but also Canaan. The Canaanites are not a different race from the Israelites. They're a different culture and worship different gods. And you don't really find European countries listed in the descendants of Noah's 3 sons. Well, I'm not going to say any more about the 3 sons except to point out that Shem, his descendants will become important to our story. Shem has a name that means in Hebrew, name. I came across a scholar's article entitled, "The Man Whose Name Was Name." So just a little sidelight on Shem. But he was the father of the children of Eber in chapter 10, verse 21, from whom come the Israelites, among others. Aram is one of his descendants, the Aramean people, and Abraham, people migrated from the area of Aram, which includes Syria and other places. But we'll just skip to verse 32. These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies, in their nations, and from these the nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. Becky, did you find Chimera?
Okay, a thing that is hoped or wished for, but in fact is illusory or impossible to achieve.
Okay, did we both have some of that definition in our...
You were closer than I think.
Google has actually somewhat supported me this time. It usually undermines my confidence in my
you are redeemed.
belief. Yeah, as I said, race is a chimera, something illusory which you cannot really pin down as to what it is and what separates one race from another. I will, before we end today, relate a sad incident from my own experience. When we were ministering in Texas, we had a church leader who had a camp where he had summer camps during the summer, and he would only allow white children to come to his camp. And he said that he didn't believe God intended for us to intermingle socially and otherwise as different races. I didn't challenge his belief as much as maybe I should have. I was, in fact, quite shocked that he had that belief. This was in the mid-1970s. But I did point out that in the Bible, God's commandments not to intermingle and intermarry with other people has nothing to do with race. It has to do with religion. God didn't want his people to intermarry with those who were worshiping idols. And he warned that that would cause them and their children to eventually succumb to false worship.
Which it did.
Which it did. Not even the wise King Solomon, because of his many wives and concubines, was led astray and through his wise influence set up idols of false gods in the temple area which he had built. Well, we'll leave that topic for now. It's about time for us to bid farewell. Next week, we're going to look at the Tower of Babel story in chapter 11 and eventually get in chapter 12 to the main focus of the first part of Genesis, a man called Avram or Abram, whose name was changed to Abraham. And he and his descendants will be the focus of the rest of the Old Testament and even some of the New Testament. But let me end, as I sometimes do, with questions about the Tower of Babel story. First, was God afraid that these people would somehow infringe on his territory and his rights? He looked at them building the Tower of Babel and says, if I don't put a stop to this, I'm paraphrasing, nothing these people want to do will be impossible. They're trying to build a tower into the heavens. Does that frighten God? Or what is his motive for putting an end to this project? And if you don't remember how he did it, maybe you want to read ahead into chapter 11 of Genesis. Well, I'm through talking now, pretty much. Any other comment or question you want to raise?
Nope. I think we done covered it.
So we're done for this time. Keep tuning in to get more pearls of wisdom and knowledge. And I hope you have a great day and the weather doesn't get too odd. Bye-bye, everybody. Oh, we almost forgot. Don't send money.